On today's episode, Spartan Jacksonville recap with our in-house expert, Jack Bauer. Welcome to the OCR Report podcast, brought to you by the OCRreport.com. We are the only podcast to focus exclusively on the elite sport of obstacle course racing, from Spartan to Tough Mudder to the OCR World Championships, and wherever the elites are racing, we are there. My name is Will Hicks, and this is the OCR Report. Welcome back to the OCR Report. Thank you for listening. My name is Will Hicks, and you are listening to the only podcast to focus exclusively on the sport of obstacle course racing. If you are interested in other parts of OCR and not just who won and lost and the elite side of OCR, you should check out some of the other shows on the OCR Report network, like Obstacle Running Adventures and Overcome and Run and World's Toughest Podcast. Speaking of World's Toughest Podcast, we are working on an episode about the newest lawsuit to hit Tough Mudder. You may have heard. If you haven't heard about it, I'm going to talk about it in the news in a minute. Today in our show, we talk with Jack Bauer and recap the first race in the Spartan U.S. Championship Series, Spartan Jacksonville. Great race, very eventful, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Before we start, you can email me at willhicks@gmail.com. You can follow the show on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at the OCR Report. And you can be a part of the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. If you have not left a review for the show, you need to. It's very important. It'll make you feel better. Are you having a bad day? You should leave a review for the show, and I will read it on a future episode. You can also subscribe to our newsletter by texting the word TOUGH to the number 22828. That's TOUGH to the number 22828. Let's talk some news. Let's talk race results first, and then we will break down the news around them. Last weekend in Jacksonville, Florida, was the first race of the 2019 Spartan U.S. Championship Series. Your top men and women for the super length race are, for the men, in first place, Ryan Kempson in 1:02:54. And second was Ryan Atkins in 1 hour and 3 minutes, 46 seconds. In third was Ryan Kent in 1:04:31. In fourth was Kirk DeWint in 1:05:05. In fifth was Tyler Veerman in 1:05:27. In sixth place was Robert Killian. In seventh was Johnny Luna Lima. In eighth was Brian Gawiski. In ninth was Bracken Cracker. And in 10th was Rich Ryan. Congratulations, gentlemen. You may notice I haven't mentioned the defending champion, Ryan Woods, yet. We'll get there, I promise. For the women, in first place was Nicole Mericle in 1 hour, 8 minutes, and 50 seconds. Nicole finished almost 7 minutes ahead of the second place woman and in 12th place overall. Nicole finished ahead of notable men like John Yatsko, Ian Hosek, Jordan Bashimi, Mark Batris, and Luke Skyrunner Bosick. Nicole Mericle is the real deal. Watch out for her this year. In second was Lindsay Webster in 1:15:36. In third was Rose Wetzel in 1:16:15. In fourth was Rebecca Hammond in 1:16:16, less than a second behind Rose Wetzel. In fifth was Alyssa Hawley in 1:16:40. In sixth place was Leanne Wastany. In seventh was Rhea Coble. In eighth was Nell Rojas. In ninth was Tia Reagan. And in 10th was Faye Stinning. Congratulations, ladies. There's a lot to unpack about Jacksonville. We're going to talk about this with Jack Bauer in a minute, but just some bullet points. Jacksonville had the two closest finishes for podium spots that I've ever seen. There was a controversial disqualification of the men's defending champion, Ryan Woods. There was a return to the podium of one Rose Wetzel Sinnott. Rose Wetzel, if you need her. There was a non-disqualification of another male podium athlete who maybe should have been. Jack and I talk about that. Talking about Ryan Kent. Spoiler. the dominance of Nicole Mericle over a strong women's field, the depth of the women's field. There was barely room in the top 10 for Faye Stenning, and Faye Stenning is no slouch. There was a surprise win in the men's field by Ryan Kempson. If you had predicted Ryan Kempson was going to win Jacksonville, you are either A, a liar, or B, Ryan Kempson's mom. There was the continued greatness of Ryan Atkins at whatever distance, whatever terrain, flat, mountain. Atkins doesn't care. He's going to finish on the podium no matter what. The spear throw. Is it a bad obstacle or is it the worst obstacle? We're going to talk about all these things with our guest, Jack Bauer, in a minute. Except the spear throw. I don't think we get into that. But have I talked about the spear throw? The spear throw in Spartan is equivalent to the electrical obstacles at Tough Mudder, World's Toughest Mudder. They're fun and they're great for the open waves, but the spear and electricity have no place in a competitive event. It should not determine the winner. It should not determine who the podium is, the spear or electricity, if someone's willing to do electricity or not. Don't at me. You know I'm right. The spear throw is a novelty gimmick. You might as well replace the spear throw with that thing where you throw a ping pong ball into a bowl so you win a goldfish. On Sunday, many of those same athletes return to the course in Jacksonville to run in the Spartan Sprint. Your top 3 men and women in the Jacksonville Sprint are, for the men, in first, Ryan Kent in 29:31. In second, Ian Hosick in 29:52. And in third, Ken Carigliano in 29:56. For the women at the Spartan Jacksonville Sprint, in first, Rebecca Hammond in 34:47. In second, Leanne Wastany in 35:27. And in third, Casey Monroe in 37:30. Savage Race kicked off their 2019 season with their first race of the year in Gainesville, Florida, just 90 minutes down the road from Spartan. The podium athletes of the 3-mile Savage Blitz were, for the men, in first place, Yuri Force in 21:06. In second, Abraham Ashton in 23:50. And in third, Stephen Wilk in 25:34. For the women at the Savage Blitz Gainesville, in first, Chrissy McFarland in 28:22. In second, Leah Duhan in 31:53. And in third, Jamie Stiles in 33:19. All those race results can be seen on our Instagram page at the OCR Report. Kim DeVos is our social media guru, and she does a great job of getting that data, making it pretty, and posting the results very quickly every weekend. If you want race results info quickly every weekend, you want to know who won, you want to know who lost, you don't have to listen to a whole podcast to find that out, you should follow us on Instagram at the OCR Report. Well done, Kim. Keep it up. In the Open, I mentioned Tough Mudder has been hit with another lawsuit. This one is from the co-founder of Tough Mudder, Guy Livingston. This is the second big lawsuit that we've been aware of or been made aware of by Tough Mudder in the last several weeks. We're going to do a full episode about this over on World's Toughest Podcast, but the short story is Livingston says Tough Mudder owes him $8.3 million. Why? Because Livingston says, and this is all according to the lawsuit, this is not my words, when Active took control of the Tough Mudder board and sent Will Dean out, they violated contracts Livingston had with Tough Mudder. Oh, did I mention Active? Yes, that Active, the Active that you pay money to when you sign up for a Tough Mudder or when you sign up for your local 5K. Active controlled Tough Mudder. They took a controlling interest in the company over the last couple of years. So Eventbrite isn't coming back for registration anytime soon if you run Tough Mudder. So what does all that mean for Tough Mudder? It could mean one of 4 things, and 3 of them are bad. I will get into that on World's Toughest Podcast soon. Before we talk with our guest, let's read some iTunes reviews.
5 stars.
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 stars. 5 stars.
Our first review comes from Seb David in Canada. Love Canada. Seb David writes, all the good stuff without the fluff. 5 stars. If you only listen to one podcast to get you up to speed on what's happening in the world of competitive OCR, this is it. Precise information delivered in a no-nonsense way, no time wasted, detailed data nerding out, and interviews with top athletes. Perfect for that drive to work or short run. Thank you, Seb. Very kind. Seb is an active member of the OCR community. I see him over on the OCR Discord frequently. Seb's actually part of a conversation that's been kind of ongoing back and forth about how much non-OCR content or non-OCR discussion is right or is appropriate for an OCR podcast. What do you think? Should we as OCR podcast hosts, should we stick to OCR, or do you want to hear about my new dog? My kid did really well in the talent show at school last week. Talk about that. How about those San Diego Padres, huh? $300 million for Manny Machado. Very excited about that. I'm going to name my first kid after Manny Machado. He's already 12, but I'm still going to do it. Anyway, you can join that discussion over on the OCR Discord. Go to bit.ly/OCR Discord. Shout out to Josh Chase for running a good site over there. It's worth your time. bit.ly/OCR Discord. Discord is DISCORD. If you'd like to be a part of the show, like Seb David, you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Also, just click the purple podcast button on your iPhone or iPad, your Apple device. Search for the OCR Report. Click our logo, and then scroll down to click Write a Review. And I will read it on a future episode. Very happy to welcome Jack Bauer back to the show. Jack is the recognized expert in all things stat-related for obstacle course racing. If somebody asks, who is the best OCR stats guy, the correct answer is, you mean besides Jack Bauer? It's time to talk with Jack. Let's go to the phones. Jack Bauer, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Will. What a crazy week at Jacksonville, huh?
Crazy weekend. There was some controversy we're going to talk about in a minute. But first, let's talk about the race. Who won the first U.S. Series race in Jacksonville?
Yeah, so Nicole Mericle continued her ridiculous hot streak to start the year and won by over 7 minutes on the women's side. That's just unreal. She just ran away with the race. I think her overall placement, including the men's field, was 13th overall, and this was an unbelievably stacked race. So for her to beat that many guys just shows you what kind of shape she's in right now. And then on the men's side, Ryan Kempson got his first ever win at a U.S. National Series, and there was an amazing sprint finish between Ryan Woods and Ryan Atkins that we'll definitely get into later. But the story of that weekend was definitely Ryan Kempson having his breakthrough race.
I want to talk about Nicole in a minute, but let's talk about Kempson first. On YanceyCamp.com, you have a kind of prediction contest where people can say who they think the top 5 finishers are going to be. How many people, or what percentage of people, picked Ryan Kempson to win the race?
Yeah, Ryan Kempson got absolutely no love in that contest. Basically, just to give a quick little recap, I set up a thing where everybody could enter a contest. You list the 5 men and the 5 women that you think you're going to get top 5 in Jacksonville, and we're going to be continuing this at the other major races throughout the season, but we'll get into that later. But basically, Kempson had 12.6% of people thought that he would finish in the top 5. That's it. So basically 1 out of every 8 people who entered the contest thought that Kempson had a chance. In terms of who actually thought he'd do well, Ryan Kempson himself was the highest. He gave himself the highest prediction. He was the only person to think that he would finish in the top 2. Ryan predicted himself in second place, so his confidence really paid off, and only 2 more people predicted him top 3. So basically, he got like 3% of the total votes thought that he would be on the podium, and about 9% thought that he would be 4th or 5th place.
That's interesting. Like, even Kempson was like, you know what, hey, I'm going to do good, but I'm not going to win the whole thing, but I think I'll do good.
Yeah, but I think there's false expectations and then realistic ones. Of course, everyone thinks they're going to win, but the fact that he predicted that he would beat either, or at least Atkins, Woods, Killian, at least 2 of those 3 to start the year, just showed you what kind of confidence he has in his fitness. And I definitely, when we gave our predictions last week, I didn't end up choosing him in my top 5, but I do remember mentioning that a couple of athletes told me that he has the most untapped potential in the sport. And I mean, look what he did. I think Ryan Kempson, everyone's known he's just been right on the cusp. He's had some unbelievable performances in stadium races in the past, and he took out Seattle really hard and a few other races with really competitive fields last year. And everything came together perfectly this first race, and he won by almost a minute. He's the real deal.
So because of the new point structure this year, we've talked about it a lot, Kempson has a pretty big point lead on the second place, Ryan Atkins. How do you see the rest of the series going? Will Kempson be able to hang on to his lead here?
Yeah, I think this is kind of his coming out party. A lot of people knew that he had that potential to hang with the top guys. There's obviously been a gap the past few years with Woods, Atkins, Killian, Cody Moat. They've kind of been on their own level, but Ryan Kent, VJ, Batris, Ryan Kempson himself, that they've all just been just the next tier below. Not to say that they're bad racers at all, but they were in that like 1B class. But any race, anyone in the 1B class can put everything together and beat those 1A guys. And I think that Ryan Kempson just proved he can take down anybody in the sport.
It'll be interesting to watch the next race in Alabama to see how Kempson does. If it was, if he finishes in like 10th place, maybe this was a fluke. But if he finishes in like the top 3, then hey, this is Kempson's for real. He's breaking through.
Yeah, and my girlfriend's family is from Alabama, and let me tell you, there are no mountains there, and I'm going to assume it's going to be just like Jacksonville race, pretty flat, same weather or so. I wouldn't be surprised if Ryan Kempson pulls off another really good finish this time. He might even win it again. Who knows? I mean, he might just ride this momentum and have all the confidence in the world that he can take down everybody. So wouldn't surprise me at all if he pulls it off again.
That would be something to watch. If he's able to put together 2 or 3 wins on these flat courses at the start of the series, maybe he builds a lead that he can't be caught later in the year.
Yeah, because now with the point system, it's 300 for first, 264 for second, 240 for third, 216 fourth, and then 192 for fifth. And after fifth, it's just -1. So it's 191, 190, and so on. So getting those top 5 places or top 4 makes the biggest difference due to the 1 point increments after that. So if he can secure another couple top 3 or so finishes, that he's really going to be in some great potential or great contention for the overall series win.
Let's talk about Nicole Mericle on the women's side. She's had a dominant start to the year and a dominant first U.S. series race.
Yeah, I don't even think dominant's the right word. Just her performance in that race was just incredible, to steal Steve Hammond's quotes, or absolutely incredible in a British accent. But yeah, she just ran away with that race. It seemed like a lot of the women or the top women were doing burpees on some obstacles due to the dew in the morning, and just a couple of the obstacles are new. And I heard that Nicole was like the one of very few of the top women to actually go burpee free in this race, but she still had a huge gap for most of the race. And I mean, when you win by 7+ minutes against a field that deep, you are in some incredible shape at this point. So I think this is the year that Nicole really, really makes that difference. Everyone knows she's had that pure running ability. Came from she had a great college running career, and then everyone's known that she's had great potential. But it seems like she's just putting it together. She had a great OCR Worlds, winning the 3K, and then having a great relay also. And I just think that her confidence is sky high right now, and she's going to challenge Lindsay as the year goes on as well.
You mentioned Lindsay. Lindsay finished in second place to Nicole. Lindsay has won the U.S. series every year that Spartan has held it. Do you think this is the year that someone else wins first place?
I mean, the point system is really different. So if Nicole can run away with a few of these wins, it would basically take Nicole getting fifth back-to-back races a couple times later in the year. Honestly, I I don't think Lindsay is focusing on doing well in February and March. Obviously, she wants to win her third straight race at Tahoe for the World Championship. But at the same time, the U.S. Point Series, that makes a huge difference in terms of paycheck and stuff. So I don't know. I think that Nicole has such a good fitness level right now, and she's riding the momentum. And I think that she's just intimidating for the rest of the women's field at this point, just given how fast she's running. So I wouldn't be surprised if Nicole runs away with it at this point. But of course, we're only one race in. Alabama might be a completely different show than we saw in Jacksonville, and then who knows what Seattle will throw our way also. So but the fact of the matter is, Nicole won by 7 minutes. She could have basically done 90 burpees at least and still won the race at that point with that much of a lead. So she's just on another level at the moment.
I think Nicole versus Lindsay is going to be the interesting. I don't know if rivalry is the right word, but it'll be fun to watch them going forward. Nicole quit her job last year to focus on training full time and focus on running as as a career, as a job going forward. So she's had a lot more time to train this last off season in the last 6-9 months. So, and Lindsay's been doing that for several years now. So it'll be interesting to see how that affects Nicole's preparation and just physical ability.
Yeah, it might be the OCR version of like Tom Brady versus Peyton Manning rivalry.
You know what? Rivalries are good. Magic and Larry in the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
The Bulls and the Pistons, the Lakers and the Celtics. It's good for sport to have strong rivalries like that.
Yeah,
so.
and I don't think that there's anything wrong with being friendly with each other and cheering on. OCR has a really good camaraderie, but at the same time, I don't mind it when there's some smack talk. Have you seen some of the Instagram posts like Ian Hosick and Faith Stenning? They kind of started a little bit of smack talk before the race and calling out certain people. It's not like mean-spirited or anything, but I think that it just puts a little bit of flavor into the race instead of just like, oh, good job, I'll see you next major race and then we'll do well. I like calling out people and just seeing how people respond. What's your take?
Yeah, Nicole, she ran a little smack after the race too. It was good-natured and tongue-in-cheek, but it was funny. And and she won, so she had a little room to talk. So
yeah, and who's what are you going to say to her? It's like, oh yeah, well actually I lost to you by at least 7 minutes and probably by a lot more. So Nicole can talk whatever she wants at this point.
Seriously, there are only 12 people out there, 12 men that finished faster than her. So she has the room.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about the finish between Ryan Atkins and Ryan Woods, and then what came out of that with Ryan Woods. How did they finish second and third place?
Yeah, so Ryan Atkins crossed the line just after Ryan Woods. They had an unreal sprint finish. It was literally a sprint finish, not just they're separated by a couple seconds and both sprinting. This was like the legitimate track type finish. Both of them were at the tire at the same time. Ryan Woods got to the A-frame cargo net, which was probably 100 or so feet away from the finish line. He got to it about 2 seconds ahead of Ryan Atkins. Ryan Atkins jumped on it a couple seconds after, started climbing, and Ryan Woods, while he was climbing, touched the vertical support, I guess, if you want to call it, on the truss, the metal frame, and he did that on 3 separate occasions while climbing up the middle, and they both ended up rolling down. Ryan Atkins jumped from a few feet up. They landed at the same time. Ryan was a little bit to the right, and it looked like he actually almost ran into a sign that Spartan had positioned right next to the fire pit. He kind of had to change path just a little bit, and then both of them were sprinting, and Ryan Woods edged him by about half a foot. It was a crazy finish. But the big controversial thing was that Ryan Woods touched the actual physical structure, not just the netting itself, while climbing up. Now, and that was, yeah.
Did Woods grab the structure, or did he touch the structure?
It kind of was just like in a climbing motion. Like a lot of people, I do it myself. I try to climb as close to the metal support frame as possible, just because there's not as much slack in it. You get up quicker when the cargo net is a little bit tighter. Then it's just easier to climb faster. So, but Woods, he actually used the metal frame to climb up. And apparently there has been a ridiculously huge controversy about it, because he ended up getting disqualified after the race as a result, because it was against the rules in the Spartan rule book, which I'm sure everybody reads.
So what does the Spartan rule book say about touching the support?
Yeah, basically it said that, I'll just paraphrase because I don't remember off the top of my head, but you are not allowed to touch the truss frame itself. However, if you look at the shape of the truss, you get to the top and it has metal there. So just to get over the top of it, you are just incidentally touching the truss. So there was a lot of ambiguity on the rule. And Spartan, they did a 20-minute Instagram video or Instagram TV video just explaining their decision on why they disqualified him. And then, spoiler alert, they actually reversed the decision afterwards because there was a huge outcry. So if you want to talk about the outcry, go for it.
So as the race finished, it was Ryan Kempson, Ryan Atkins, Ryan Woods. Very close, right?
And then Ryan Kent. So it was the 4 Ryans in a row.
Yeah, top 4 Ryans. And Spartan has a rule that they have the right to review video, and any correction needs to be made before the ceremony. But once the podium ceremony has been done, those are the winners. And before that ceremony was done, they looked at the video and they said, "Oh, Ryan Woods, you're disqualified. You got 0 points." And so that was Saturday. Huge outcry from the community. On Wednesday morning, they finally announced, they made this video you talked about, and they said, "No, never mind. He has 12th place instead." Why did they give him 12th place?
Yeah, so instead of just straight up disqualifying him, they apparently have a Spartan athlete and just rules committee. I forget the exact name of it.
Okay, and their competition. Have you heard of this committee before? Is this a real thing?
I haven't heard of it, but I guess that they mentioned that there are 4 people on it. One of them, David Watson, Mike Morris as well. Kevin Gelati is the athlete representative, and I'm not sure who the 4th person is.
We could get into those 4 members. I have a lot of respect for David Watson. I think he's doing a good
David
thing.
Watson has done I've had several conversations with him. He is, people don't realize what he's doing behind the scenes. This is the guy that Spartan needs to become legit on an international level. I 100% support what this guy's doing behind the scenes.
I've heard some controversy over the selection of Kevin Gelati to be the athlete representative.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there was a vote or anything, or if Spartan just decided. I mean, Kevin's a pretty outspoken person, and he has a lot of experience in not just OCR, but also the triathlon world. But I mean, he knows his stuff. A lot of people he might rub the wrong way, and I think that there's a little bit of dispute on like why he was chosen as opposed to having the athletes choose someone. But I mean, it is what it is. I think that he's going to give a fair opinion, whether or not people are fans of him or not. But I think that he's not a bad choice for this. Like he has a lot of experience in racing history.
So what did the competition committee decide?
Yeah, so the competition committee, and let me just add this as well. It wasn't just Ryan Woods who got disqualified. Hunter Russell, who just also was on the Spartan Pro team, he would have been 21st originally. He actually, while they were doing the live video, they showed the finish line area. They're watching all the top 10, top 15 guys come in. They're not really showing the race anymore. They're just giving a recap. And then they cut back to the A-frame cargo net. And Hunter Russell just happened to be on it when that happened. And then the announcers were like, "Hey, he just did the same thing that Ryan Woods did, and he was touching the vertical frame." And that was like the only reason that anybody noticed it. And he also got disqualified as well. So once the Spartan competition committee made their decision, they reinstated both Ryan Woods and Hunter Russell, gave them both a 5-minute penalty. Ryan Woods dropped from his initial 2nd place to 12th place, which means that it didn't affect any of the top 10 payouts. And his new points, instead of he would have got 264 points, he dropped to 185. But that's a huge difference versus 0. And Hunter Russell, he would have had 176 points being in 21st place, and then he dropped into 27th, and he would have had about 171 at that point. So definitely better than having 0 points for him as well. So I think that I watched the video, and it took Ryan Atkins 16 seconds, and it took Ryan Woods 18 seconds to complete the cargo net. Even by touching it, Ryan Woods was actually 2 seconds slower than Atkins. And for such a short obstacle, 5 minutes is pretty harsh. But at the same time, I think that it is good that they realize that the punishment didn't fit the crime, and this at least preserves both of them a chance to be competitive in the series the rest of the year.
Do you think, not to be cynical, but do you think Spartan looked at the results and said, if we give Woods a 3-minute penalty, it messes up our top 10 payouts. If we give him a 1-minute penalty, it's not, it's going to mess up this. Oh, if we give him a 5-minute penalty, it knocks him out of the top 10. And so it's, if we give him a 5-minute penalty, it tells the masses, hey, we heard you, now be quiet. How do you think they decided that 5-minute penalty?
Yeah, so actually 10th place was Rich Ryan, and he finished in 108.14, and Woods is now 108.46. So basically, if they did a 4.5-minute penalty, he would have been a couple seconds behind, but if they did a 4-minute penalty, he would have been in 10th place, which would have affected the payout. It's only $100 at that point, so it's not a major amount, but then it kind of gets into that overlap area. I don't think that that's a good point though. I don't know if they specifically did 5 minutes just so that it wouldn't affect it. Cause what if he was Ryan Kempson's position where he finished a minute faster than his initial time? Would they have been like, oh, let's do 6 minutes? Cause that ends up being the, out of the top 10 at that point. Like, I think that it may have played a little bit of a role. And it was a convenient number in this case, cause 5 is just a very round number. But I don't know. What's your take on that?
They have I don't know the exact number. They have a set penalty for if you miss burpees. At these National Series races, they have cameras on the burpee stations. And when you have to do burpees after a missed obstacle, you go do your 30 burpees. If you do 28 burpees on accident, they'll assign you a time. I don't know what the time is per.
So actually, I do know this. So I think it was the 2017. I don't think it was it was 2017 European Spartan Championship. So Albert Soler from Spain, he ended up winning the race by about a minute 15. They looked at the burpees on video, and it turns out that he did like 26 or 27 of them, and they penalized you 30 seconds per missed burpee. So his time, you add 3 or 4 times, they added a minute and a half or 2 minutes to his time. It actually bumped him down to second place. So he crossed the line thinking that he won, and then retroactively later, they ended up taking off the minute and a half to 2 minutes, bumping him down to second place. So he basically won the European Championship, and then so there is some precedent. And if you also look at the rules, Spartan says that you lose 30 seconds per burpee up to 10 missed burpees, and if you do like 20, you get DQ'd because that's 10. So 30 seconds times 10, that's 5 minutes. I guess it's consistent with what they would have done if you missed 10 burpees. But it just seems on such an easy obstacle that's not really failable. I mean, who's not going to complete the cargo net? This isn't a rig or some other thing where you're going to see people doing burpees. It just seems a little harsh in that instance.
Generally, if someone were to touch that bar going over the cargo net, would they make them redo the obstacle, or would they send them to do burpees?
I don't even think you can get over the cargo net without touching the bar.
Well, you're right. You're right. Over the top piece. But if someone were to touch the side piece, if they were caught by a race marshal, what would the on-course penalty be?
I mean, allegedly they discussed it, and apparently they're instructed to tell the race official is supposed to tell the athlete that they did not pass it. They have to go and do a reattempt, or else they fail the obstacle. But I talked with Hunter Russell. He said that nobody told him that. Like literally, he said that he was not told anything, the ruling that he made an infraction or that he could redo the obstacle until he already crossed the finish line, which was just after that. And otherwise, he would have redone the obstacle gladly, he said. But he also added that he thought Spartan did a great job handling the situation and that Hunter was willing to take whatever consequences were attached to his infractions. So he's like, the rules are the rules. He understands that that's what it is. But I've never seen it enforced before. I think that's another one of the controversial things.
The only reason this is even an issue is because we're able to watch the races on live stream on Facebook or on YouTube. What do you think about this kind of instant review or video review process where thousands of us watching the race can see when someone breaks the rules?
Yeah, I know it's happened in golf before that they'll have a viewer be like, oh, this person, when they picked up their ball and then replaced it later on, like they put it 5 feet closer to the hole and they'll get called out, or like someone makes a brief contact on a practice swing and they call the actual like the PGA, and then they'll like add a stroke or someone to someone's score. I know it's happened in golf
Jack,
before.
you are not wrong. I was going to bring this up in a minute. People, Joe Schmo, regular guy, sitting on his couch watching a golf tournament on TV. Literally millions of dollars at stake in this golf tournament. So anyone, you, me, your dad, your uncle, watching golf on TV sees a minor infraction, can call a number. Now, they've changed the rule since, but it used to be you could call and say, hey, that guy, he replaced his ball wrong. And like this, nobody from Montana can call up and affect a millions of dollar golf tournament because of something he saw on a live broadcast. It blows my mind. And because of that, because there's you can't have 20 million referees watching your show or your sport. Because of that, the PGA changed the rules. So I don't think this is sustainable. I think Spartan needs to. Anyway, this cannot stand.
Yeah, and I guess it's almost a good thing that this happened early, like first race of the year, and that they're not selective. Like both of them, Hunter and Ryan Woods, are on the Spartan Pro team. Like it's not like they're deciding, well, to save our face, let's hope that so and so who isn't on the pro team, maybe we'll see if they did some infraction instead. They like called it out very quickly that two of their own pro team members did that, and they were willing to disqualify them in the first race and basically eliminate them from any contention in the U.S. series the rest of the year before going back on their decision and reinstating them. So I think that Spartan is serious about breaking the rules, but it's almost like the NFL where you have targeting, or in the NHL you have you have instigating a fight, or in NBA you have like a double technical. Those are serious infractions. This isn't like offsides where you get a 5-yard penalty in football. It's almost as if they should have different levels of offense if they're going to do this, as opposed to a blanket 5 minutes. Because 5 minutes, even if this was like Tahoe or a race that's 2.5, 3 hours, 5 minutes is still a ton of time. And this is one of the shorter sprint or supers that they've had basically all time, like an hour, 2 minutes for the win. That is a really, really fast super. So 5 minutes makes an unbelievable difference. What are your thoughts on having a blanket 5 minutes for everything, if that's how they're going to proceed from here on out?
You explained a minute ago about how 30 seconds per burpee, maximum of this adds up to 5 minutes. Okay, I'm okay. I guess that brings me around to being okay with the 5 minute number, right? But what Woods did was not a 5 minute penalty.
No, and I explained it took Ryan Woods 18 seconds to get over it. Yes, it might take 18 seconds to attempt a rig and then you fail, but no one is failing the cargo net. That is not a failable obstacle unless you're afraid of heights, but you're not going to be doing. It's just not an obstacle anybody burpees on.
Now, let me tell you what I don't like. I don't like it when people run. You don't see this as much as you used to, but when people would run up, touch the obstacle, and then go off to do their burpees because they knew they could do their burpees faster than they could do an obstacle. That, to me, should be penalized with like actual time penalty, right? Yeah,
that should be like 60 burpees, not 30 for just, trying to be a sleazeball getting past it.
But this isn't a...
Not that burpees are... that's a completely different topic. Is burpees even...
Right.
Like the fact that they're giving a penalty like that in terms of time as opposed to a burpee punishment, that's a little different for Spartan also.
Well, I guess after the fact, what are you going to do? You can't make him go do burpees in his house. So
yeah, that's true. And especially with the finish line so close, as Hunter explained to me, that they didn't even tell him until after he crossed the finish line, which was so close to the obstacle. What was he going to do? Just tread back over the finish line, pretend his chip didn't register, do the obstacle again. And it just doesn't make any sense at that point.
So if you were in charge of the committee, or if you were the committee, you could make the decision. How would you have penalized Woods, if at all? Yeah,
so that's a really tough call. If you're in the heat of the moment, I know that there's a term called race IQ. I think Sebastian David mentioned it in a post that I've seen before. And basically, while you're racing, the more pressure, like you're just not thinking right. And basically take your normal IQ and divide it by 2, and you're going to make some stupid decisions mid-race, whether or not you realize they're against the rules or not, just because you're just so focused on getting to that finish line first. So I think that Woods, I don't think that he intentionally did it. Like he was probably doing the strategy of, I want to be close to the structure, and that because that's where the rope, or that's where it's tighter, I need to shave a half a second off, like trying to beat Ryan because the finish line is right in front of us. And it was more of my hand just happens to be, I have to reach somewhere with my right hand. I don't think that he intentionally did it to gain a couple of seconds. Because as I explained, Ryan Atkins went up in 16 seconds versus Woods in 18, even with holding the medal. So it's not like it really gave him that much of an advantage. It actually he was 2 seconds slower as a result of it. But I would say that it's a really tough call. I think that Spartan is doing it right because they're trying to legitimize the sport. If you are drafting in a triathlon, if you're too close to the person in front of you on the bike or while running, you're not allowed to do that. You have to maintain a certain distance behind, or else you get disqualified. Whether or not you win the race, whether or not it's just incidental, that's just the rule. The rule's a rule. You get disqualified. It's happened to several big names in the past. So I think that if OCR wants to be legitimized, which is what David Watson and Mike Boris and all them on the Spartan side are trying to do, you're going to have tough decisions like this. And unfortunately, like Ryan Woods, with the new, you can't drop a race, it made it really, really difficult in this case. But I just think that the punishment didn't fit the crime, and that he shouldn't have been DQ'd in the first place in this particular instance. But I don't know. I'm glad that he got reinstated. I would not have penalized or have given a 5-minute penalty. I think that that's too much. I think that what should have happened is they should have told him you have to redo it, assuming that an official caught it. And they said that Robert Coble was right there. So if anybody in the sport has been an official who can see this stuff, Robert Coble's been with them for a long, long time. So if he caught it, he should have known the rules himself to tell Ryan Woods to go and do a reattempt. So I wouldn't have given the 5-minute penalty. I think that the right decision would have been for Woods gets off. I know that he's in a dead sprint, but you got to turn around and redo the obstacle in that case, if that's what the rules say, rather than disqualifying him and then having this whole situation with the 5 minutes involved. So that's a long answer.
So that's a long answer. But to summarize, you're saying the referee missed it, so there's no penalty.
Well, the referee called it out, but I don't think that they...
After the fact, after the race was over. Yeah,
like retroactively, basically. So yeah, I think that it's kind of like the New Orleans Saints game against the Rams, like that pass interference at the end. I mean, it should have been called. You missed it though, so there was no call, and then the game just kind of went on because it was a missed call. There's human error, and obviously you want to get the right decision, but I feel like you have to make that decision on the fly, because the second they get down, like they could have called it while he was climbing up, like, Wood, you touching it. Like, you have to redo it, and instead of while he's rolling down, and then he has a few more seconds, and then he's getting ready to get into sprint mode. Like, it could have been pointed out in the moment, like while he was doing the obstacle climbing up, which is slower than going down, that he's going to have to redo it as soon as he reaches the bottom. So I think that since they missed it on the fly, it's kind of, you can't really do anything about it at that point. I understand wanting to get it correct, but human error exists for a reason.
Okay, so I think you're saying the same thing I think. Here's the penalty I would have given. That's it. Nothing. They missed it. Spartans referees or umpires or field course marshals, they missed it. The race is over. Woods is in second place. Now, let me tell you, the only exception to that rule I would make is if they get cameras at every single obstacle and they have people watching them, live during the race.
Live.
Because we haven't really talked about this. When the race, the coverage, the actual race coverage started, the men go first and they run out for about half an hour, and then it switches to the women. The women start their race, and we watch them, run about the first half hour over the same obstacles that the men just did, right? And then it switches from the women to the end of the men's race, right?
Yep.
We, as viewers at home, did not see at least 50% of the race.
So I actually talked to Hunter Russell. I was like, So I didn't actually see what happened in the second half of the race. What was that like? Apparently, it was flat for about a quarter mile, and then it was a swamp for a 400 mile. And basically, it continued like that for the rest of the race, where you were just trudging through water, and then you had flatter sections. And you didn't know that while watching it. I mean, just like you described, you saw 30 minutes of the men's race, 30 minutes of the women's race, and it was great coverage while they were actually showing it. But there's the gap, and who knows how many other infractions might have happened there. They just happened to see it because it was directly in front of the finish line, and they happened to show that moment right there.
So unless they can, and again, we're talking about young sport, it costs a lot of money, coverage, race, cameras and officials. I get it. But until we get to that point where we can cover every obstacle, or not every obstacle, maybe the ones that are not cheatable, but where there's a possible, it's a lot easier to judge whether a spear sticks than whether someone bumps against a pole they're not supposed to bump against. There was a thing just last year about John Alvin with a tire flip. Like, did he put the tire all the way down? There's a thing with Killian a couple years ago. Did his foot brush the ground as he was doing a rig? And until they can cover all of these, like with cameras, they need to have people, like trained officials out there. And the onus is on Spartan. It's not on the athletes to say, hey.
That word trained officials makes a difference, because I've been in several races, whether it's a running road race or an OCR race, where the officials are just like, or the volunteers are just like texting, or I'm like, which way do I go? There's no tape. And then they're like, this way. And it turns out to be wrong. Or, you take it. Stuff like that just happens. And unless you have people who are, I don't even know why you need to be qualified. Like, if it's just simply, hey, if you see anybody touch this thing or have their feet touch the ground or fall off, tell them that they have to do burpees or redo it, whatever the rule is in that case. That shouldn't be that difficult to find people to do that. But it seems like you have a lot of people who just want to get a free race, and their heart's not in making sure the competitions or that everything's fairly ruled. That's the biggest issue at this point with volunteers.
What we're talking about sounds like a big ask, right? But I don't think it is. It only really matters for the top 10 men, top 10 women.
And look at the outrage that has happened. Clearly, there are enough people who weren't racing at that venue who care about something like this. So you'd think that there have to at least be 10 people who are there who are volunteers who might share the same viewpoints and want to make sure that things are done properly. And maybe they can have, like, when they volunteer at the morning and they're picking stations, instead of being like, all right, you three go over there, you three go over here. How about it's like, hey, which one of you really actually cares about how the outcome is? And then if you're kind of like half-assing it, it's like, all right, you can be at the 8-foot wall because that's probably not going to be that controversial.
That's pretty easy to judge.
Yeah, we want or like barbed wire or something. Like, we want the people who are actually caring about, like, watching everyone's feet on a rig, or making sure that the spear stays in for a couple seconds out. Like, I think that they could do a little bit of a vetting process for the volunteers.
Jack, before we move on, we haven't even talked about the controversy with Ryan Kent and an obstacle. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so obviously most of the attention was on Hunter Russell and Ryan Woods for touching the truss on the A-frame cargo net. Ryan Kent definitely had some controversy as well later in the race. You already mentioned that about the whole issue with, like, post-race video. Either you catch it live or you don't. That's kind of the way it is. But Ryan Woods' fiance actually on video was standing at the mud pit and got it on video that Ryan Kent kind of jumped to the side, kind of bypassed the water a little bit. And as a result of that, you see Ryan Woods jump in 2-3 seconds ahead of Ryan Kent, and then Ryan Kent basically just continues running almost, and leaves the mud pit a couple seconds before Ryan Woods. So clearly he didn't go in the water. I don't know. He may have a little bit, but you couldn't tell completely from the angle. But he definitely kind of went on the edge of the obstacle as well. But I mean, that happens a lot in races. If you watch some of the Tougher Mudder championship videos from a couple of years ago, that they had that mud mile, and every single person was just hugging the edge, because it's usually has a little bit of a slope on it, and it's shorter to get out. And I think that's kind of what Ryan Kent did right there. He just wanted the least amount of water to try to get through the obstacle. Ryan Woods just kind of jumped through it, didn't make it across, and then he was in the water. And the way that the obstacle is kind of set up at the moment, you just have this basic tape, plastic tape, just lining roughly the edge of it. There's no like you must stay a foot inside of the tape to properly pass the obstacle. So it's one of those really, really ambiguous obstacles as well, where it could be left up to interpretation whether or not he intentionally skirted it. I think that most people, they try to take the path of least resistance, and in this case it just happened to be on video, involving a person who got DQ'd later in the race as well, so there was a little bit of outcry on that. But I think that Spartan, when they reviewed everything, they kind of made up their mind that, you know, if it's not clearly stated in the rule, they can't retroactively change it at the moment. What I think would be a good idea is, instead of using that tape, which anybody, I think even Ryan Kempson, like, he jumped through one of them and his hand touched it and it like snapped the tape in half. It's not durable at all. Like, why don't you just set up a couple of posts, a foot, 2 feet into the edge of it, so that way you can't use the edge, and string like some bungee cord or like a tight rope, just so that you must stay within those boundaries if you want to force people to actually go through the water. So I think that even in the Spartan Instagram video with the explanation that they gave, it sounded like they're going to kind of rephrase the rule where you're not allowed to go around the water. You actually have to physically touch the water. I'm sure that if you can jump, like long jump 10 feet and clear that or whatever, you're free to do that. But if you go anywhere like on the obstacle, you have to touch the water otherwise. But that's how I interpret it. So what are your thoughts on what happened?
Yeah, I think this is on Spartan also. Like, the reason for the controversy is because Kent stayed within the boundaries of the course, but he did not go through, or it looks like you can't, watching that video, you can't actually see the whole thing.
It's like that immaculate reception. It's like, did it touch the ground? Yeah. I don't know. Like
you can see his upper body, and you can kind of see but you can't. And then I didn't know it was Wood's fiance. She says, "Oh, he didn't go in." And so your brain kind of fills in the details where, like, people would swear, "Oh yeah, I saw it. He didn't go in." No, you didn't actually see it. No one's actually sure, but we know he stayed within the boundaries, right? So if they just move those boundaries in, you know, Rolling Mud's what, 25 feet across, 20 feet across?
Not even that much. But yeah, that's what I was saying. If you have like some sturdier element which forces you like, just think of the dunk wall. Like, you have this far to go. Like, why not put up a couple of like wood posts or something that kind of corral you into a certain zone? Or even if you don't want to use wood, to like just use some rope. Like,
or you know what you do? You have the tape leading up to the obstacle, and then you get rid of the tape. No tape at the obstacle. So it's very clear. You're either in the obstacle or you're out of the obstacle, right? Yeah. There's no boundaries for the course. And you have a marshal there like, hey, you're not in the obstacle. Because you can't penalize people for jumping over the water. Like, if you say, oh, you have to go in the water, well, that's the bad rule, because some of those guys can jump over the water.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I try doing it whenever possible. Like, if I can clear that and not have to get my feet wet, I'm trying it.
I think the solution, honestly, it's counterintuitive.
Yeah, but I'm not going on the edge.
Get rid of the tape. Get rid of the tape, and then people will go right through the middle, or they'll go. It'll make it so it's very clear who's trying to skip obstacles. Either way, like, whatever they choose to do on it, I think it's on Spartan. It's not on, you know, if Ryan Kent took an advantage, you know what? He's no dummy. None of them are dumb. Like,
no, it's like barbed wire. If you see an edge that is uphill or downhill, like, you're going to choose your side based on which one's going to get you quicker. It's not their fault, that the athlete's fault, that Spartan decided to have the string higher or the barbed wire higher on one end or lower on the, like, you're going to pick the more logical path that'll get you through it quicker. And sometimes, like, if I'm on rings, as I'm running up to it, I'm looking for which bell is the lowest, because in case I have a little bit of a slip, that extra 2 inches below, that helps a little bit. Like, or you look for the hay bale, not that that's an issue anymore, but you want to find the one that's closest as opposed to the one that's further away, because, like, your spear has a better chance of hitting it if it's close. Like, it's just strategy, and I can't fault Ryan for doing it, because it wasn't against the rules at the moment. I think that there's kind of an unwritten rule that you should at least attempt to go through in the water, because I've had a couple of people do that to me in races where they're just like running all along the side and on like a longer water stretch, and I'm like, I'm trudging through the middle of this. You're not even getting tired. So I think that skirting it definitely is a controversial move, and I think I support people like Ryan Woods where they're going right through it, and basically the rest of the field, it seems. But if it wasn't explicitly stated in the rules, he's just kind of taking advantage of a loophole, and how can you really call him out for it at this, or do anything to disqualify him at that point. I think that going forward they can make some changes, but he was just following the rule at the time, it seems.
And I want to be clear, like what Kent did, what Woods did, are very different than people that are actively cheating.
This is simply trying to shave a couple seconds here or there. This isn't like somebody looking around, they missed their spear, no one's looking. I mean, that would be a hard one to redo. Or like if you're on Olympus and you're in the middle and then like your toe touches the bottom and you're like, I'm just going to pretend that didn't happen. Like that's a completely different scenario than what either of them were involved with.
And I'm even thinking of like what happened to Kent last year at Kent's last race when he got injured. Guys, one guy in particular was throwing elbows or shoving, maybe, depending on how you look at it. That kind of conduct
at Fenway.
Yeah, that's really not acceptable. That's not acceptable.
I agree.
So.
Yeah, completely. That's the whole punishment fit the crime. So, yeah, at least the debate was open. I think that Spartan, I don't know how they formed their committee, but I'm glad that they at least recognized that there was a need for a little less ambiguity. I don't know how many people are going to actually read the rules, or even if they read it once, it's not like you're going to remember it word for word later. And most of the time it's like, oh, a wall. Okay, I'm going to climb over it. You're not thinking, oh, what did the second paragraph of that wall section say was legal or not while you're racing? Like that doesn't go through your mind. So there's a lot of, I'm glad that they're at least bringing it to the table, the discussion, but there's a lot of improvement that needs to go out, or else we're going to have another controversy like this.
Before we move on to the women, going back to the women, do you have any last thoughts on Ryan Woods or on the controversy this weekend?
Yeah, I just hope that this week isn't remembered only for the Ryan Woods and Hunter Russell controversy. I think that it was more of the Ryan Kempson coming out party and just showing that he's for real, and that also Ryan Atkins, after biking halfway across Canada and basically not running much at all this off season, to be able to pull off a performance like he did and just narrowly miss second place before this and then getting converted to second place. That was just a phenomenal effort on his end as well. So I hope that the positives are remembered from this race, because Ryan Kempson did a really great job, and it was almost the four Ryans finally getting their shining moment all together in one race before the Woods got pushed back 5 minutes.
Over on the women's side, we talked about Nicole Mericle. She dominated the women. But there was also, and we talked about Lindsay Webster in second, but there was also a good finish in third and fourth place. What happened with the third and fourth place women?
Yeah, Rose Wetzel appeared out of a time machine and then just made her presence known again on the women's scene. She ended up getting third, which is a phenomenal finish. A lot of people wrote her off just because she hasn't really been on the scene for a couple of years. She had a baby, and obviously I've never had a baby, and I'm a guy, but I can only imagine the toll that it takes on your body to recover and regain fitness. So for her to finally have had that breakthrough again and make her presence known on the scene and take down some really, really strong names, and finish third in a race like this, Rose is back for real. She was obviously one of the pioneers of the sport, and it's just great to see another person. I know that we mentioned the Elite Eight, and now it's like I don't know the alliteration now, but now there's 9 names to watch on the women's side who have the potential to podium at all these major races.
I have 2 kids, and when my daughter was born about 5-6 years ago, 6 years ago, I know exactly when. We were in the hospital room and the baby's asleep. It's just like this is a few hours after she was born. The baby's asleep on my wife's chest, and I'm kind of like laying on a couch next to it. And it was like real stressful and the whole deal. And there's a nurse in the room, and my wife's awake. The baby's asleep on her chest, and I looked at the two of them and I said, "You know what? I don't know about you guys, but I am exhausted." And
you probably got some looks.
They did not think that was funny at all.
Yeah.
So Rose and Rebecca Hammond had almost the same finish that Woods and Atkins had at the finish line, at least. No controversy with it. But it was a great finish. Rose was one of the first kind of women, or one of the first athletes we kind of all watched. And then we saw her on Ninja Warrior for a few years. And when we heard she was running there, everyone was happy to hear it. Like, oh, hey, Rose is back. That's great. But I don't know if anyone, and maybe you could talk to it with your predictions that we got.
Yeah.
So what did people think? How did people think Rose was going to do?
So don't you may have looked at the numbers. Hopefully you don't remember. What percent of people who voted do you think thought that Rose would be in the top 5?
And I would say less than 10%.
2.3%. That's it.
Well, I think that number will be a lot higher for the next race.
Oh, I'm sure. And I'm sure Ryan Kempson's going to get a lot more than 12.6% as well. Tyler Veerman on the men's side, just to jump back, got 0% of votes, and he finished 5th. So between the three of them, Rose, Tyler, and Ryan Kempson, that is a lot of disrespect for some great performances. So if you want to look at the women's side, Lindsay and Nicole both got 97.7% of votes for thinking that they'd end up in the top 5. I don't know who voted and didn't think that to be in the top 5, but
how could you not put Lindsay Webster in the top 5? And maybe you don't know Nicole Mericle. Okay, maybe
even
fine.
After her crazy performances, like the first few races, like I think that if you don't put Lindsay, there's something wrong with you. And Ryan Atkins got 97.7% also.
I am throwing my papers in disgust. Someone put Ryan Atkins like finishing in 6th place, whatever.
Yeah, I know that we said Tyler Veerman got disrespected with 0, but for Atkins and Lindsay and Nicole not to get 100, come on.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. So yeah, that was amazing. And then the third most likely person to podium, according to all the votes cast, was Rebecca Hammond. Just over 3 out of 4 people, 77%, thought that she would end up on the podium, and she got 4th. She almost got 3rd, but like you were describing, Rose outkicked her at the end. Great sprint finish, beat her by a second or two to capture the podium. And then 5th place, honestly, I was kind of surprised. She had a really off year last year compared to 2017, but Alyssa Hawley got 5th. So 24% of people thought that she would end up getting top 5, and that was what she ended up getting. So really good performance by Alyssa as well. But I think on the women's side, it's a toss-up. It was Rose getting 3rd and having putting her mark on the women's field again the best story, or was Nicole winning by over 7 minutes the best story? I'm as great of a story as it was to see Rose come back. I think that just Nicole's dominance was the number one showing of the weekend.
Man, I'd almost go the other way. Like, we know Nicole's great, right? That's not a surprise. We expected her to win.
Did you think that she was 7 minutes faster than Lindsay, Rebecca, everyone in an hour and 8 minute course? I don't know about that.
No. The margin was a surprise, but the result wasn't. But
that's what I'm saying.
Rose,
the margin was the biggest deal.
To see Rose in the top 5 or 8, and actually on a podium, like I don't know if, what 2% of people saw that coming. So yeah, no, real happy for Rose.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the men's side, for a 7 minute gap, Ryan Kempson, he was just under an hour 3, and then if you go all the way to John Yatsko, who was the 13th male finisher, he was just under 1:09. So that's a 6 minute gap for 1st through 13th place right there. And Nicole won by over 7 minutes, just to give a little bit of a scale on the dominance. So I think that's personally the most impressive stat of the weekend.
You know what's also impressive about that finish by Nicole is the men that she finished in front of. She beat, like if you just go by time, she finished faster than John Yatsko, Ian Hosick, Jordan Bassimi, Mark Batres, and Luke Bosick. All 5 of those men, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Any of those 5 men could have finished on the podium on the men's side.
Yeah, there are some really doesn't matter, male or female, but just the fact that she beat several top men in the same course. Nicole's fitness is just unreal at the moment. Super impressive performance, and yeah, I would be intimidated, male or female, if you see her on the start line.
So looking toward Alabama and toward the rest of the series, what do you think about Nicole versus Lindsay? How do you think Rose and Rebecca Hammond are going to do the rest of the year?
So honestly, we didn't talk about her yet, but remember the name that I gave as a big prediction last week?
There were two I'm thinking of that you gave me. Nell
Rojas. I think
Tia
finished
Reagan
around 8th or 9th.
Nell finished in 8th. Tia was in 9th.
Yeah, so Tia Reagan was the other woman, and the spear throw happened just under a half an hour into the race, and Nicole already opened up a huge gap on the field. But about 10 seconds behind her was Tia Reagan. Like, Tia was the only one trying to stay with Rose, and then she had a minute 30 on Lindsay at that point. But Tia Reagan took the race out hard. Nicole's basically put a huge surge in the first 400 meters just to kind of intimidate the field, get a little bit of a gap. But then right after that, Tia took over and just kind of stormed to the front and was leading for a long time. And it turns out that Tia ended up doing 120 burpees. I don't know about you, but burpees usually take a minute 30, minute 40 for me. And then if I'm a little bit more tired, a little longer for the 30 burpees. So even if it took her like 2 minutes or so at most, anywhere from a minute and a half to 2 minutes, that's 6 to 8 minutes off of Tia's time. If you take off 8 minutes, she would have been in second place. So if she ran a clean race, she had the potential easily to beat Lindsay, to beat Rose and Rebecca. So I would watch out for Tia Regan next race in Alabama if she can cut those burpees down.
If we had betting in OCR, Tia would be like a good bet because she finished 9th this week or this race. So no one's really looking for her for next race. But you're right. She puts together a clean race. She'll be on the podium. Yeah,
and it's just like Ryan Kempson. It's like what would the odds have been heading into the race versus now? It's like he skyrocketed because he had a great performance, while others, that they have the potential, but they didn't have the result that they were looking for. So, but that would be really interesting. I would love to start something like that. I'm not a gambler, but I do like my OCR stats and using that as leverage. So I'm if that ever happens, I might start taking part in that.
We've talked a lot about potential and athletes having potential and finally meeting their potential. When I was young, I heard that when you hear someone say they have potential, what that means is they haven't done anything yet.
Yep.
So exactly. It's so good to see Kempson and Nicole being dominant and winning and finally fulfilling that potential.
Yeah. When have you ever heard anyone talk about Ryan Atkins' potential? Like never. So you're exactly right on that. He's already there.
Before we move on to some other races, any last thoughts on Jacksonville?
Yeah, it was honest. So I crunched the numbers, and in the history of Spartan, if we remove Tahoe and Killington, every single champion, that first Texas one, if we remove all of those races, how difficult?
Hang on. So remove all the World Championship races.
World Championship only. Let's pretend those are out of the equation.
All right.
If we're including every single race in the history of Spartan, I looked at the men's side. Just before we started this podcast, I didn't have time to finish the women, but I'll have that stat next time. But if we look at every single non-World Championship race in the history of Spartan race, how deep do you think this field was compared to every single other race in history?
I want to say number one, but let me tell you why. Because I'm looking at the results, and I see in 9th place for the men was Bracken Cracker. Bracken to finish that, to have eight men faster than Bracken, actually 9, including Ryan Woods, is ridiculous. Yep. The 10th place woman was Faye Stenning.
I know how it is unreal how deep this race was.
So I'm going to say number one, but I don't know if I'm right or not.
Okay, and like I said, I haven't run the women's numbers on it, but I'm definitely going to have that statistic available next race. All right, so statistically, Jacksonville all time was the second deepest men's race in history besides the 2017 Monterey Super in terms of non-World Championship events. And like you just mentioned with some of those names who showed up on the start line, like John Yatsko got 13th. Like he's an all-time great. I know that Cody Moat wasn't here. I know Hobie Call wasn't here and Hunter McIntyre. So there are a few big names who weren't there. But it's a who's who of everybody. I mean, Robert Killian, Johnny Luna Lima, Kirk DeWint, Ryan Woods, obviously, Ian Hosick finishing in 14th. This was an unbelievably deep field. So in terms of how stacked the starting lineup was, this was the second deepest non-World Championship race of all time on the men's side.
You know what? Part of that I want to attribute to Tough Mudder recently saying there's going to be no prize money. So athletes like Ray Coble, who have been focusing on Tough Mudder, the toughest Mudder races, they're on the Spartan side this year, full time. I wonder if, but this is a
February 23rd. I don't think the Tough Mudder was ready at that point.
But that doesn't explain. Yeah, even if that was the case, that doesn't explain John Yasko and like all these other. So I wonder if this is a one-time thing, or do you think every race in the series is going to be this stacked going forward?
No, I think that this is going to be, I would say at least the first 3. I have a feeling that once the series kind of shakes up a little bit. If someone's consistently placing like 15th, they might be like, you know what, I don't want to go to Utah. I'll save the money. I'm just going to finish. I'm only fighting for 1 point here or there at that point, and I'm not going to get paid out at the end of the year. So that might affect things. But at the same time, you have the Spartan Pro team, and a lot of the people who finish in the top 25 or so are Spartan Pro team members at this point. And there's some, like, we didn't even discuss that. Ryan Atkins and Lindsay are on the pro team now, and Ryan Woods is on the pro team, and Ryan Kent's back, and Kirk DeWitt. Like, you've got some serious firepower on the men's and women's side for the pro team. And I think that I'm not sure how the contracts are written, but I'd imagine they want you at as many of those as possible. So I think this is going to be the new norm, and even a top 15 or a top 20 finish, that's going to take a serious effort at any of these U.S. series. And this doesn't even include the Stadium Series or the Mountain Series. So once those roll around, that they're going to be just not as deep, but just way deeper than your typical race throughout the year. So I think that competition in Spartan race this year is going to be at an all-time high.
They've announced that there's 200 members of the pro team, which is kind of led to some
it's not. It's
online.
Not actually 200. I've seen the list. It's more about 80 per gender at this point. There might be some who are unsigned, but yeah, there are a lot.
Well, it was a good race. I enjoyed watching it. Usually what happens on a Saturday morning, I will roll out of bed and I will check the results. Like, hey, who won the race, right?
Now, but you can't on Chronotrack anymore because that's gone, unfortunately.
Right. But this last week, I was out of town, and so I couldn't. I planned to watch the race live, right? But it was at 4 a.m. local time, and I was on vacation in the mountains with my family. So I was like, no.
Nope.
So I stayed off my phone. I stayed off the internet all day long until I could finally like sit down with my laptop and just watch it for an hour. Kind of like when you TiVo a big game and you kind of like don't want to talk to anybody because you can watch it at home. And it was great to like watch it like as a sporting event. I didn't know who was going to win. I didn't know about the Woods thing until after the race was over. It was a great. The announcers were good. The race coverage was great. Just a great experience.
Yeah, I think that if they could find a way to show a split screen race in its entirety, and because I mean the announcers would be showing the same thing. Like they could just show you that Ryan Woods and Ryan Atkins were battling like a mile from the finish, but only comment on the women's race in the meantime. But you can at least have a little bit of an overlap, or likewise, if you're showing the sprint finish behind them, you can at least see where Alyssa and some of the other battles were happening on the women's side, even if they're not calling it in the moment. So I think that would be a nice addition, just so you can kind of see the whole race unfold as opposed to just a half or so of it. But yeah, I think that they've done a phenomenal job in terms of like the video coverage, Steve Hammond sprinting out there using the drones, and I think that it was a really good production overall. Yeah,
it's come a long way since they started it themselves a couple years ago.
Yep, exactly. Totally agree. But I'm looking forward to the rest of the season. If this was a great first race, if you're trying to make an impression on new fans of the sport.
The next race in the U.S. series is the Alabama Super on March 16th. We'll have a whole preview episode for that race before it comes. But do you have any just initial thoughts about it?
Oh, I mean, all that we can really go by is this race, and all I can tell you is that Ryan Atkins is going to be in better shape. But so look out for him. But at the same time, Ryan Kempson made his presence known. Ryan Kent wasn't too far behind, and VJ is going to be there. It's going to be stacked. I can't give predictions at this point. I'm going to need a couple more weeks to kind of see and ask around how everyone's training is going and just see how the stats roll out. But this is an exciting season. And the women's side, will they close the gap on Nicole? I'm assuming so, because she can't possibly win by 7 minutes every race. Like Lindsay wasn't even doing that before, but Nicole is just performing in another world at the moment. So I'll be curious to see the battles for second through about 10th or so on the women's side. But if Nicole keeps this up, she's going to be tough to take down, especially if it's a flatter course.
So while the eyes of the OCR world were on Jacksonville, Savage Race held a race also. Tell me about Savage Race.
Yeah, so if you know anything about Savage Race, they might as well rename it Yuri Force's Race, because they had Savage Blitz in Gainesville. Same day. Both of these races were in northern Florida, so But basically everybody, instead of doing Savage Race, ended up doing Spartan, the U.S. series. So it wasn't super competitive. I know that Mac Rush, he ended up competing. I think he finished like 8th or 9th. He went out too hard, he said on Instagram. But Yuri Force ended up winning the race. They have like a 5K distance, and then their standard 6 to 8 mile distance, but the blitz is about a 5K. So Yuri Force won it in 21:06, and second was Abraham Ashton, who he got another podium last year at a different Savage Race, and Stephen Wilk got third for the men, about 4.5 minutes back of Yuri. So basically, it was the Yuri Force show. No surprise, he's basically the Bracken Crocker of the Savage Race scene in terms of like just same amount of head hair and just kind of overall build and track background. So that was what happened on the men's side. For the women, first place was Chrissy McFarland, and she beat Leah Duhon by about 3.5 minutes. And then third place is a name I've seen a few times at Savage Race on the podium, Jamie Stiles in 33:19. So as you can see, that quality athletes, but nothing compared to what happened at Spartan that same weekend, a couple hours away.
Yeah, the level of competition at Savage isn't as high as Spartan. But
well, it depends. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's as deep, but you still see like there's this guy James Zoik. He's like he can hold like a 5:20 marathon or half marathon pace. Great runner. He's been right behind Ryan Woods a couple times. And Yuri Force, he's beaten Ryan Woods a few times, and Atkins, he did a race a few years ago. Hunter did one before. Like, you've got some pretty big names who do them occasionally. It's mainly Air Force Ken Crigliano. He does them as well, and he'll kind of jump back and forth between Spartan and Savage Race. But in general, you kind of have like your Spartan side and your non-Spartan side for a lot of the racers. And actually, speaking of Air Force Ken, he ended up getting third in the Sunday sprint. So he actually did Spartan. I don't see his name under the Savage Blitz for Saturday, so it looks like he just kind of showed up fresh on Sunday, but he got beaten by Ryan Kent and I think Ian Hosick for third.
Yeah, anytime Savage Race holds a race, they have to pay royalties to Yuri Force because he owns that race.
And I mean, like, not gonna lie, I've got a pretty good name, Jack Bauer, but Yuri Force, that's a pretty solid name also.
Strong, right?
Yeah, it's not bad to have that name either. It's like Usain Bolt. It's like, he's going to be fast. Yuri Force, he's going to be a force. So, yeah, pretty good job by his parents on that one.
There was also an international race called the Reborn OCR. They had their pit race, they call it.
Yeah, and I honestly didn't pay too much attention to it, but you sent me the links, and we saw recently Nikolai Dam and Leon Kofod, both of them, they did a couple of races. Spartan, they were in the U.S. for a few weeks. They did the Arizona and SoCal races, and the two of them ended up getting top two. Nikolai won in 28:05, and about little over 30 seconds later was Leon. And third place was Stefan Hansen, and he was almost 4 minutes back of Nikolai. So I think that the two of them clearly were on a different level. I don't really recognize many of the other international names during this race, but you saw what they did in the U.S. against some of the top names, taking down Ryan Kent, Kirk DeWint, and just making their presence known in the U.S. So it's some real good competition over in Denmark.
And on the women's side, a name that I recognize from Tough Mudder, Ulrika Evanson, finished in second place. It's a 5K race, so it's pretty short, so you're going to have to go pretty fast.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, you've seen Ryan Atkins podium at 3K, and same as John Albin, and then a month later, podium at World's Toughest Mudder. So just having that range, it's amazing what some OCR athletes are able to do, whether it's short or long. And the winner in that race was Ida Matilde Steensgaard, and I believe she was on the podium. I think she got second or third at the OCR World's 15K this past year in London. So she beat Ulrika by about 3:09, it looks like. Clearly really talented, and I think that she was just behind Lindsay in the 15K at OCR Worlds. So they've got some serious talent in Denmark, no doubt. These
international names, they don't really have a lot of, relevance right now. But toward the end of the year, when World Championship season starts, they'll be in London, they'll be in Tahoe. It'll be fun to put some faces to these names.
Oh yeah, and I know I've mentioned it before with the Spartan rankings that I have, but I just love pointing out that there are more than just the top U.S. racers, and guys like Nikolai and Leon Kofu just coming over to just show where they're at and compare, and Johnny Lunalima going over to Europe, and Alyssa Hawley last year, just to kind of give a comparison as opposed to only the Europeans coming here for Tahoe or OCR Worlds when it was in Canada or Ohio. It's just good to kind of see how people stack up. And a couple weeks ago, we had the Middle East and African Spartan Championship, and that guy, Mohammed Mira, ended up winning it. And he actually, in my upcoming rankings that'll be out by the time this podcast comes out, he's actually ranked ahead of Killian and Tyler Veerman, who got 5th and 6th at Florida. So his performance there was the equivalent to getting about top 5 at Jacksonville. So, and you've obviously seen what Susanna Kokomova's done over the years, and it's just great showing that there is more than just the top U.S. racers out there, and Canadians, because they're obviously dominating the sport for many years. But I just love bringing attention to the international field, and glad you're paying attention to this race in Denmark as well. And we'll give more shout outs, I'm sure.
It's also fun to watch when our athletes, I say our because we have ownership, but like last year, Nicole Mericle went over to the Spartan Trifecta Championship in Greece, and she finished 2nd overall for the weekend.
Yep, and she also did that the Red Bull race during the snow, the Conquer the Castle, I think is what it was called.
Yeah, the All In, Red Bull All In. Yeah.
Red Bull All In, yeah, the one in the snow, and she ended up winning that against some serious European competition that not everybody in the U.S. knows, but if you're from Europe and you're in the OCR scene, you know the name she took down. Nicole's obviously, she's proven it this year. She's proven it in the past. She was the OCR World 3K champion again. She's clearly one of the best in the sport, but there are also some really talented international names out there as well. So it's really cool spotlighting them.
Jack, any last thoughts before we start wrapping it up?
This is a great start to this. It wasn't the start to the season, but for the first major race of the year, this was not a dud. This was not the Super Bowl where it was 3-3 for most of the game. And I'm a Patriots fan. That was brutal to watch. If you're an OCR fan, this was the complete opposite of that. So it was a great start to the season, and if any more of the races can be like this and just have some great battles and sprint finishes for podium spots, hopefully no more disqualifications and then controversy like that. But if we can just have some solid racing like this, 2019 might be the best year yet.
Jack, you mentioned your rankings a few times. How can people find these rankings you're talking about?
Yeah, just go to yanceycamp.com. There's a banner that says rankings, and you'll see a drop down. So 2019 Spartaners rankings. And basically what I did was went through all the results this year through this past weekend. And right now, Ryan Kempson is the number 1 male racer ranked in the world, and Nicole Mericle is the number 1 on the women's side. No surprise, honestly. But that's because they've run the hardest schedule and performed the best relative to the schedule they've raced so far. But yeah, they're going to keep changing it. Every week that there's a race, there are a few races this weekend, and I've added age group rankings this year as well. So, for instance, on the men's side, off the top of my head, some guy, Cole DeRosa, he is an age grouper, but he commonly places top 10 or so overall in elite rate in the overall field, even against like the elites, or when you compare his time to the elites. So he is ranked 40th in the world, despite only running age group so far. So you can kind of see where age group guys stack up and women, as opposed to the solely elite racers. I know he's in his 40s, so that's why he's running the age group, I'm assuming. But it's pretty cool to see how they stack up and have some more stuff coming out. Full results on the OCR prediction contest. Perfect score was a 30, and the winning score this week was a 16. So Ryan Woods getting DQ'd and then not being in the top 5 affected people who thought that he would win by 5 points. So if that didn't happen, the winning score would have been only 21. So there were a lot of screws in the voting this week. So it's going to be really difficult if you've seen how it's gone so far to have a perfect ballot this year. But Yancey's got some really, really cool prizes that we're giving away. So we'll be releasing new prediction contest before every major race, whether it's Spartan, OCR Worlds, Tough Mudder, whichever ones they have at the moment. So just get some cool prizes. I think Beat Elite is partnering with us as well. So just make sure you enter and kind of see how you stack up, because it's easy for us to give predictions on the mic, and then everybody sits back and goes like, oh, well, yeah, I thought this person would have done well. But here's your chance. Go ahead and vote, see where you stack up, and maybe we'll win some cool prizes from us.
Jack, how can people follow you on social media?
Yeah, so usually I just go on Instagram. Some people request me on Facebook, but I try to keep that separate from OCR. But if you go on Instagram, just Jack_Bauer_OCR. That's how you'll find me. And I'm usually posting some nerdy OCR stats, so hopefully that's your thing.
I sent a screenshot of something you posted to someone I know, and they're not really into OCR. And they sent it back to me with your name circled. And they said, they're like, what's this guy's real name? And so I sent a screenshot of like your picture with your name. Like, that's his name. And he's like, yeah, that's clickbait. I'm like, no, it's his name, man. He was there first.
I could give you a whole like podcast on funny stories involvement. I'll give you one. So my freshman orientation of college, so like May or so of my high school senior year, they basically took all the accepted students. And then I was an engineering major, so they took like some of the engineering majors, put you in a room, just kind of showed you what it would be like. And they had everyone introduce themselves, say which high school they went to and stuff. And so went around the room, and it was my turn. And I'm like, oh, Jack Bauer from Manchester, New Hampshire. And one kid just like stood up and just started clapping. He's like, you have no idea what you've done for this country. It's an honor to go to school with you. And I'm like, okay, man, this is awesome. But so I've had like plenty of stories like that. So I thank my parents for giving me this name. It's had some pretty cool icebreakers and stories through the years.
You know what? There are several people listening right now who have no idea what we're talking about, why your name is special.
Yeah, if it was about 5 years or probably about 7 years ago, it might have made a little bit of a difference. But basically, if you've ever heard of the show 24, main character played by Kiefer Sutherland had the same name, and it was one of the most popular shows for probably 8 or 9 years on TV. So I got lucky with that.
Jack, any last thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I think it was a great week and kind of covered a lot of stuff. So how about you? Any last closing thoughts?
You know what? It was such a great race, and it's a shame that it got kind of sullied, or that the Woods thing distracted from the great race, great weekend.
Yeah, I agree. Just remember Ryan Kempson, his breakout performance, and Nicole's unbelievable margin of victory. That's what I would want people to take away from it.
And you know what? Going into Alabama, I bet you Ryan Woods has something to prove. I would not bet against Ryan Woods next time.
No, absolutely not. And he needs those points.
You're right. Yep. All right, Jack Bauer, thanks much.
All right, thanks, Will.
Special thanks to Jack Bauer for appearing in this episode. Well done, Jack. We're going to talk with Jack again very soon for our Spartan, Alabama preview episode. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, and I will talk with you soon. Go spend time with someone you love.